Your cousin is already a branch manager, and you are still leeching off of us." My dad spat those words out right in the middle of our family reunion. But what they didn't know was that I was the owner of 10 restaurants across the city. And the very next day, right in front of everyone, I fired that exact same manager they were so incredibly proud of. Before we dive into today's story, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You might just be our lucky subscriber today, because we are picking a random viewer to send a special gift to. Also, leave a comment down below telling us where you are from and what time you are watching this. You never know, simply watching this video today could be the start of your own streak of good luck. To most people in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Pinehaven, Sam Mitchell was just a silent, background character. He wasn't much of a talker, he didn't hang out at the local bars, and he certainly didn't know how to brag, even when he desperately needed to defend himself. At 29 years old, the neighbors usually saw him wearing the same faded polo shirt, a pair of worn-out jeans, and sneakers that looked like they should have been thrown out years ago. In the mornings, he would sweep the front porch of their small house. In the afternoons, he helped his mom, Mary, organize the old mason jars and plastic bins they used back when she ran a small catering gig. And at night, he would quietly leave the house, carrying a beaten-up backpack with a zipper that was barely hanging on. "Where are you off to this time?" asked Patrick Mitchell. His dad was always sitting on the old porch chair by the front door. He held a mug of cheap instant coffee, wearing a permanent scowl, as if the entire world was to blame for his misery. "Just taking care of some things, Dad," Sam answered softly. "Taking care of things," Patrick mocked, letting out a bitter laugh. "Every single day you are taking care of things, but absolutely nothing is happening with your life. Look at your cousin, Derek. Ever since he was a kid, he knew how to hustle. You are just a shadow in this house." Sam didn't talk back. He just finished putting on his backpack, gave a slight nod to his mom, and walked out the door. Behind him, he could hear Mary gently scolding his dad. "Patrick, please, it is getting late, just leave the boy alone." "The boy?" Patrick snapped. "He is 29 years old, Mary. How much longer are we going to call him a boy?" Sam stopped by the front gate and closed his eyes for a second. It wasn't that he didn't feel anything. It was that he had gotten so used to swallowing the pain. He was used to biting his tongue and keeping all the arguments locked inside his head. He was used to looking like a man with no ambition, standing in front of the very people who were the reason he had ambitions in the first place. When he was a kid, Patrick used to look at him differently. His dad used to brag about him because he was a quick learner at school and great at math. Whenever people bought food from his mom's home kitchen setup, little Sam was the one balancing the ledger in a small notebook. "My kid has a head for numbers," Patrick used to say. "He is going to be a hotshot accountant one day." But everything changed when Mary's small business went bankrupt. It started with a tiny loan, just to buy extra ingredients. Then, another loan to cover rent. Until a massive summer storm tore off the roof of their kitchen setup and flooded the entire street. Supplies were ruined, equipment was destroyed, and they were forced to close for 3 weeks. By the time they reopened, their regular customers were gone. Some moved to cheaper spots, and others were buried in their own financial problems. One night, Sam found his mom standing in the back of the dark kitchen, holding an old wooden spoon, crying silently. He was only 19 years old at the time. "Mom?" he called out. Mary quickly wiped her tears. "It is nothing, honey, just got something in my eye." But Sam saw the stack of papers piled on the table. Past due bills, eviction warnings, utility cutoff notices, and a long list of people they owed money to. The next day, Sam didn't go to his college classes. He went down to the wholesale market and started carrying heavy crates for pocket change. And that was where his slow drift away from his original dreams began. Sam had an older sister named Olivia. She was 5 years older than him. She was the first to leave the house, moving 2 states away to work grueling back-to-back shifts as a live-in caregiver, just to send money back home. The night before she left, she hugged Sam in the kitchen while their parents were asleep. "Look out for them, okay?" Olivia whispered. "What about you, Olivia?" Sam asked. She smiled, even though her eyes were shining with tears. "I will take care of myself. You are the one staying behind. You have always been the strongest out of all of us." Olivia didn't know that those words would turn into a heavy boulder on Sam's chest for years, because after she left, Sam became his mother's only refuge. He became the one running to the pharmacy for Patrick's blood pressure meds. He became the caretaker for their youngest brother, Noah, who was still in elementary school and constantly sick with severe asthma. "Hey, don't you have school today?" Noah asked him one morning. The little kid was lying on the couch, wheezing after a bad asthma attack. "It is fine," Sam replied, tucking a blanket around his brother. "I can catch up later. When I get rich, I am going to buy you brand new sneakers, man." Sam smiled. "You just focus on getting better first. Then we can talk about the shoes." Because of the endless wave of family problems, Sam never finished his college degree. At first, Patrick understood. But when Patrick lost his steady job as a dispatcher at the city bus depot, his words started turning bitter. "If you had just finished your degree, you would have a real job by now," his dad would constantly remind him. Sam stopped trying to explain that he quit school for them. He stopped reminding his dad that he was the one standing in line at the pharmacy. He was the one begging for credit at the corner grocery store. He was the one hauling boxes at the market just so they could have dinner. In Patrick's eyes, dropping out meant you were a loser. And since Sam didn't graduate, he became the easiest target to blame. On the other side of the family tree was Derek Vance. He was Sam's cousin, roughly the same age. He was the son of Aunt Brenda and Uncle Fred. Ever since they were kids, the treatment between the two of them was night and day. At family gatherings, Derek was always at the center of attention. They made him give toasts. They bragged about his brand new clothes, his fancy sneakers, and his latest school awards. Sam, on the other hand, was the one ordered to go buy ice, clean up the paper plates, or watch the little kids playing in the yard. "Derek just has that presence," Aunt Brenda said one time, looking Sam up and down. "You, Sam, you are way too shy. In the real world, the weak ones get eaten alive." Mary heard that and immediately squeezed her son's hand. "My son isn't weak," she said softly. "He is just quiet." But in a loud world, quiet is often mistaken for empty. One night, while looking for extra work, Sam wandered into a small, run-down diner near the transit station. It was called Teresa's Diner, owned by an elderly woman named Teresa Baker. The location was terrible. It was cramped, hot, and constantly smelled like frying oil. But the line was always out the door because the food was incredible, and the owner was kind. "What can I do for you, son?" Mrs. Baker asked when she saw him standing outside. "I was wondering if you need a dishwasher, even just for the night shifts. I will take whatever pay you can offer." The old woman stared at him. "Do you know how to endure hard work?" "Yes, ma'am." "Do you know how to listen?" "Yes, ma'am." "Do you know how to keep your hands out of the register, even when you are starving?" Sam looked at her, slightly hurt, but answered respectfully, "Yes, ma'am. I would rather beg for leftovers than steal a single dime." Mrs. Baker nodded. "All right, you start tonight. But remember this, you are not just washing dishes here. You are going to learn how to clean up your attitude, clean up your mind, and clean up your goals. Because in a kitchen, if your mind is a mess, the food is going to taste awful." At first, Sam really was just a dishwasher. His knuckles cracked from the harsh soap. His hands were permanently red from the boiling water, and he always went home smelling like grease. But he never complained. He watched how Mrs. Baker seasoned her famous roast beef, how she treated her regulars, and how she corrected her staff without destroying their dignity. "If an employee messes up, never humiliate them in front of a crowd," she told him. "Pull them aside. A humiliated person will either fight you or run away, but a person who is corrected with respect will learn." That stuck with Sam. There was another guy working there named Gavin Scott. He was a delivery driver who eventually became the supply runner for the diner. He was loud, always laughing, and had a knack for knowing when you were carrying a heavy burden. "Man, you are deep in thought. You look like a pot of chili that someone forgot to stir," Gavin joked one early morning after a grueling shift. Sam let out a tired laugh. "I am just wondering if this is it for me, just a dishwasher. It isn't that I am ashamed of it, but there are a lot of people depending on me, and I have got nothing to show for it. Gavin patted him on the back. You don't have to show off everything you are building right away, man. Sometimes, you have to let things simmer. Over the next few months, Sam learned rapidly. From the dish pit, Mrs. Baker moved him to inventory. Then, she trained him on the cash register. When the old woman saw that he was incredibly fast with math and the drawer was never short on his watch, she trusted him even more. You have got a brain for business, Mrs. Baker said one afternoon. I don't even have a degree, Sam replied. I didn't ask if you had a piece of paper. I said you have a brain. Sam didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At home, he was constantly told he would amount to nothing. But here, in this tiny, greasy diner, an old woman saw his potential, even when he had lost faith in himself. One day, his old high school teacher, Mrs. Irene Thompson, stopped by for lunch. She was shocked to see him hauling heavy crates of soda. Sam, she called out. He froze. Mrs. Thompson. The teacher looked at him for a long time. Not with judgment, and not with pity. She was looking for the bright kid she once taught to write essays about big dreams. You never went back to college, she noted. I couldn't afford it, Mrs. Thompson. That doesn't mean your life is over. He nodded, but couldn't find the words to reply. From then on, Mrs. Thompson would occasionally drop by, bringing him old books on business management, accounting, and customer service. She didn't hand them over like charity. She gave them to him as a reminder that he had a brain he needed to use. Read these when you have time. If you don't understand something, ask me. Questions are free. Giving up is what costs you. For 3 years, Sam lived in 2 different worlds. At home, he was the aimless son, the guy always being compared to Derek, the college dropout. But out in the world, he was the quiet, relentless worker who slowly learned how to run a restaurant, negotiate with suppliers, balance the books, plan a menu, and manage people. It was not easy. There were nights he walked home, barely able to feel his legs. There were mornings he had to force a smile for customers, even though his dad had screamed at him the night before. There were times he wanted to tell his mom everything he was learning, but he held back. He didn't want to give her false hope until he was absolutely certain. He refused to make promises he couldn't hold in his hands. Then, one day, Teresa's diner closed down. Mrs. Baker had gotten sick. It wasn't terminal, but the doctors told her she needed to retire. On their final night, she handed Sam an old, weathered notebook. It was filled with her secret recipes, supplier contacts, and handwritten notes on how to run a business. I am not giving this to you so you can copy me, she said. I am giving this to you so you remember that everything big starts small. If you know how to respect the small things, the big things will never drown you. Sam gripped the notebook tightly. What if I fail? The old woman smiled. Then you stand back up. A frying pan has to get burned a few times before it learns how to stay non-stick. That was when Sam made his first major leap of faith. Using the money he had saved over 3 years, a small loan from Gavin, and a basic business plan reviewed by Mrs. Thompson, he leased a tiny, beat-up commercial space near the train station. It wasn't pretty. The walls were cracked, the roof was patched up, and it could only fit 3 small tables. But to Sam, it was a palace built from every insult he had ever swallowed. He named it the Green Table Diner. On opening day, Gavin helped him haul in the heavy kitchen equipment. Mrs. Thompson brought a small potted plant for the counter. And Mrs. Baker, walking with a cane, showed up just to taste Sam's very first order. The only person in his family, he told, was his mom. When Mary saw the small painted sign, she placed a hand over her heart. Honey, her voice trembled. Is this yours? Yes, Mom, Sam said. It is just small for now. Mary stepped forward and hugged him fiercely. A dream you worked this hard for is never small. He decided not to tell Patrick. Not because he wanted revenge, but because he was terrified his dad would trample on the one thing he had poured his blood, sweat, and tears into. He chose to let time do the talking. He chose to work in silence. He wanted to prove to himself that he wasn't a leech, he wasn't a loser, and he certainly wasn't living in his cousin's shadow. That night, After locking up the green table diner, Sam sat alone in the dim room. The air smelled like garlic, roasted meat, and freshly sanitized tables. His body was exhausted, but his chest felt incredibly light. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was draining himself just to keep everyone else alive. He felt like he was finally building something for himself. He opened Mrs. Baker's old notebook, turned to the first page, and wrote a single sentence below her recipes. Not everyone needs to hear about your beginning, as long as they eventually see the harvest. Outside, the streetlights flickered. The neighboring shops were closing down. But inside Sam Mitchell's tiny diner, the light he had hidden in the dark for so long was just starting to shine. Months passed since the small green table diner opened its doors. What started as a cramped three-table joint slowly became the go-to spot for cab drivers, college students, office workers, and tired moms looking for a clean, affordable meal. In that first year, Sam did it all. He cooked, he served, he washed the dishes, and he counted the cash register deep into the night. There were days when the drawer was practically empty. There was a night he had to pawn his phone just to pay a supplier. And there were mornings he dragged himself into the kitchen with a fever because he refused to make quitting a habit. But he never stopped. Once people tasted his food, they kept coming back. It wasn't just because the breakfast skillets were hearty or the braised beef was melt-in-your-mouth perfect. It was because this tiny diner operated with extreme discipline. The tables were spotless, the lines were organized, customers were never rushed, but they were never ignored. And whenever there was leftover food at closing time, Sam never threw it away. He boxed it up and gave it to the homeless folks hanging around the transit station. He didn't post it on social media. He didn't brag about it. He didn't even mention it at home. By the second year, he opened a second, slightly bigger location near a major hospital. By the third year, he launched a third branch right across from a massive corporate call center. By the fourth year, things got serious. With Mrs. Thompson's guidance, Sam learned how to structure corporate taxes, manage commercial contracts, and build a real accounting department. Gavin, who used to just run local errands, became one of his most trusted operations managers. Sam may not have had a fancy college degree, but he knew how to listen to experts, and he accepted that real business wasn't just about bravery, it was about learning the hard lessons over and over again. By the sixth year, Sam wasn't just running a diner anymore. 10 massive restaurants stood across the metropolitan area under the name Green Table Hospitality. They had prime locations in downtown, the West Loop, Lincoln Park, Oak Park, and the bustling financial district. They built a central prep kitchen. They launched their own delivery fleet. They employed over 200 people. But in the eyes of his own family, Sam was still the exact same loser. He didn't mean to keep the secret for so long. But as the company grew, it became harder and harder to break the news. He knew that if Patrick found out, the first thing his dad would do wasn't offer praise, but demand to know why it was hidden from him. So, at home, Sam kept playing his role. In the mornings, he still swept the porch. In the afternoons, he still ran out to pick up his dad's medication. At night, he still left the house carrying that exact same worn-out backpack, even though he could now afford a luxury briefcase. His dad had no idea that inside that busted backpack were branch performance metrics, corporate payrolls, vendor contracts, and a notebook filled with million-dollar expansion plans. "Honey," Mary said one afternoon while folding laundry, "how long are you going to hide this from your dad?" Sam looked at his mom. "I don't know, Mom. I can't be the only one who knows forever, Sam." "I know." Sam let out a heavy sigh. "I am not hiding it just to prove a point. I want to tell him when I am finally at a place where I won't feel angry doing it." Mary's eyes softened with sadness. "You have been hurting for a very long time, my boy." "You sacrificed for much longer, Mom," Sam replied. "Just let me set everything in order first." That same year, Aunt Brenda decided to host a massive family reunion at a beautiful lakeside lodge up in Wisconsin. She claimed it had been way too long since the whole family got together, and she wanted to celebrate everyone's milestones. But everyone knew the real reason. Aunt Brenda just wanted a stage to show off her son, Derek, who had recently been promoted to a general manager at a highly popular restaurant in the city. What nobody in the family knew was that Derek's highly popular restaurant was a flagship branch of Green Table Hospitality. Sam hadn't hired Derek directly. With 10 locations and multiple layers of corporate management, Derek had applied through standard channels and got placed in a branch based on his previous food service resume. When Sam first saw the HR report and noticed his cousin's name, he didn't interfere. He wanted to be fair. If Derek was a good manager, he would keep his job. If he messed up, he would face the music just like anybody else. The day of the reunion arrived. Even early in the morning, the lakeside lodge was loud. There was a karaoke machine blasting on the patio, kids splashing in the pool, and a massive buffet table loaded with barbecue, grilled chicken, potato salad, and coolers of drinks. Aunt Carol was there, doing what she did best, spreading family gossip. Uncle Fred was there, talking loudly about his imaginary business ventures. And Cousin Eve was there, quiet and sweet, the only relative who had once secretly borrowed tuition money from Sam, keeping his secret safe. When Sam arrived, he was wearing a plain white button-down and an old watch. He walked in alongside his mom. His dad, Patrick, was already seated at the main table with the elders. Aunt Carol immediately looked Sam up and down. "Sam, honey," she said with a teasing smirk. "You couldn't even dress up a little bit? This is a resort, not the local grocery store." Sam just offered a polite smile. "I'm comfortable in this, Aunt Carol." "Oh, just let him be," Uncle Fred interrupted. "That is just how simple-minded folks are. A little too simple." A few relatives chuckled. Mary didn't say a word, but Sam noticed her grip tighten around her purse. He knew every little insult thrown his way broke his mother's heart, even though she was a master at pretending she didn't hear them. A few minutes later, Derek made his grand entrance. He was wearing a crisp dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, polished shoes, and a flashy, expensive watch. Even though they were at a lake house in the dead of summer, he intentionally dressed like he had just walked out of an executive boardroom. Aunt Brenda practically ran to greet him. "And here is our big shot manager," she announced loudly. "Now this is a boy who knows how to carry the family name." Half the patio erupted into applause. Derek took the center seat and immediately started holding court, talking loudly about the restaurant he was running. "Man, being a general manager is no joke," Derek said, popping open a soda. "Everybody relies on you. The staff, the customers, the vendors. If you aren't sharp, the whole branch tanks. You gotta have real leadership." "Exactly," Aunt Carol chimed in. "Not everyone is cut out for that." Derek threw a quick, sideways glance at Sam. "Yeah, well, some people are just perfectly content doing the bare minimum. They don't understand the pressure of the real corporate grind." The table went dead silent. Sam pretended to be busy scooping potato salad onto his mom's plate. He refused to take the bait. This wasn't the time, and this wasn't the place. But in the back of his mind, he had crystal clear memorized the exact branch Derek was managing, Derek's latest sales reports, and a few disturbing inventory numbers that didn't quite add up. But Sam didn't drive up to Wisconsin to work. He came because they were family. Even though family is usually the first to draw blood. "So, cousin," Derek pressed on, smiling but with daggers in his eyes. "What exactly are you up to these days? Did you finally manage to land a steady job?" Heads turned toward Sam. "I'm just taking care of some things," Sam answered calmly. "Taking care of things," Derek echoed, letting out a loud laugh. "It seems like you are always taking care of things. What, are you some kind of secret millionaire?" Laughter erupted around the table. Only Eve refused to smile. She noticed Mary lowering her head in shame. "Derek, that is enough," Eve said quietly. "Oh, come on, it is just a joke," Derek fired back. "You guys take everything so seriously, but let's be real, at our age, it is pretty embarrassing to still be offering zero value to your parents." That was the breaking point for Patrick. He had been sitting there, listening to the praise shower down on Derek, and his resentment toward his own son finally boiled over. He pushed his plate away and glared at Sam. "You have been awfully quiet, Sam. What exactly is your plan in life?" "Patrick, please stop," Mary pleaded. "No, Mary. He needs to hear this." Patrick stood up, his face red with anger. "Your cousin is already a branch manager, and you are still leeching off of us. The entire patio seemed to go mute. Even the blaring karaoke machine in the background suddenly sounded miles away. Everyone was staring at Sam. Some looked pitying, some were waiting for the explosion. Others were secretly thrilled that they finally had some fresh drama to gossip about. Sam felt his hands shaking under the table, not because he was intimidated, but because of the sheer weight of the pain he had tried to suppress for years. He wanted to scream, "Dad, you have no idea." He wanted to pull out his phone, pull up the corporate dashboards, the photos of his properties, the legal permits with his name bolded at the top. He wanted to stand up and destroy the narrative that he was a failure. But then he looked at Mary. Her face was pale, her eyes were welling up with tears, and she looked like she was silently begging for his forgiveness, even though she had done nothing wrong. Sam chose to take a deep, steadying breath. He stood up slowly. "I apologize. I think I need to head home." "Sam," Mary called out. He offered his mom a smile. It was forced, but gentle. "It's okay, Mom. I'll see you at home." As he walked away from the pavilion, he could hear the hushed whispers starting up behind his back. He didn't turn around. When he reached the gravel parking lot, he stopped beside a large oak tree and finally let out the heavy breath he had been holding in. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Sarah," he said when his HR director, Sarah Adams, picked up. "We are moving forward with the branch audit for the downtown location tomorrow morning." On the other end of the line, Sarah paused. "Sir, will the branch manager, Derek Vance, be present for this?" "Yes," Sam replied flatly. "Prepare every single document. The attendance logs, the vendor rebates, the employee complaints, and the payroll discrepancies. And I want Ralph there too." "Understood, sir." Sam hung up the phone and looked up at the darkening sky. He wasn't acting out of revenge. He didn't want to destroy Derek just because of a petty insult at a barbecue. But if the golden boy of the family was using his authority to abuse hard-working employees, the owner of the company could no longer sit in silence. The next morning, before the breakfast rush even hit, Sam walked through the glass doors of the downtown branch. He looked entirely different than he did at the lake house. He was wearing a sharp navy blazer, a pristine dress shirt, and shoes that belonged in a corporate boardroom. Walking right beside him were Sarah from HR, Ralph Monroe from operations, and a few senior staff members who had stayed quiet for months out of pure fear. When Derek walked out of the back office, he was wearing a cocky smirk. "Well, well, cousin," Derek announced, spotting Sam near the registers. "What are you doing here? Did you finally decide to apply? Just say the word. Maybe I can squeeze you in as a prep cook." Nobody laughed. Ralph stepped forward, opened a thick binder, and placed it firmly on a table. Sarah stared at Derek with zero emotion. "Mr. Vance," Sarah said, her voice crisp. "This is a formal administrative hearing." Derek frowned, looking confused. "Administrative? For what?" That was when Sam stepped forward. The entire restaurant was dead quiet. Through the glass partition of the kitchen, a dozen crew members were watching. They looked nervous, but their eyes held years of suppressed anger. "Derek," Sam said. His voice was incredibly calm, but carried a heavy, dangerous weight. "For the past 6 months, corporate management has been auditing this location. We have compiled official reports regarding unpaid overtime, falsified inventory records, vendor kickbacks, and severe verbal abuse toward the staff." Derek went pale, but his arrogance flared right back up. "Corporate management? Who the hell are you to talk about corporate management?" Sam took a deep breath. "I am the founder and majority owner of Green Table Hospitality." It felt like a bomb had gone off in the middle of the room, yet nobody moved an inch. Derek's eyes went wide. The cocky smirk melted off his face instantly. "No," Derek whispered, shaking his head. "That is impossible." Sarah calmly slid the corporate registration documents across the table. Sam's name was printed in bold. His signature was at the bottom. It was undeniable proof that no amount of family mocking could ever erase. "Effective immediately," Sam continued, his tone clinical. "You are terminated for cause, pending a final financial audit and legal review." You will receive whatever final pay is legally owed to you, but you will never be allowed to manage a single employee in this company ever again." "I am your cousin," Derek shouted, his voice cracking with panic. "We are family." Sam looked him dead in the eye, and for the first time in his life, he didn't back down. "Then you should have known better than to mistreat the people breaking their backs just to survive." There was no dramatic applause. There was no screaming match. There was no theatrical climax. There was only the heavy, suffocating silence of a truth that had been buried for way too long. As Sarah handed over the termination paperwork and Ralph began securing the office keys, Sam turned his attention to the kitchen staff watching from the doorway. A few of them had tears in their eyes. One of the servers was holding a hand over her chest. They weren't crying because a man was ruined, they were crying because, for the very first time, someone had actually listened to them. Sam didn't go back to the lake house that weekend to explain himself. He didn't chase after the validation of the relatives who had judged him. Instead, he stayed at the downtown branch until closing time. He sat down with every single staff member, reorganized the weekly schedule, and personally made sure that not a single innocent worker would lose a shift because of their manager's sins. But as Sam turned off the final set of dining room lights, he knew an even harder battle was waiting for him. The day had finally come to face his own father. Not as the disappointment Patrick thought he was, but as a man who had built an empire without ever asking for a single round of applause. After firing Derek, Sam didn't feel the sudden wave of relief he thought he would. People always assume that once you prove you are right and the truth is out in the open, the pain just magically fades away. But as Sam sat in the small back office of the downtown branch, staring at Derek's signed termination papers, the weight of the responsibility he carried felt heavier than ever. This wasn't a victory lap. There was no joy in his chest. All he had seen that entire day was the exhaustion on the faces of employees who had been suffering under his cousin's iron fist for months. Some of them had been forcing smiles for customers while their overtime pay was being stolen. Others had dragged themselves to work sick, terrified by Derek's threats to fire anyone who called out. Some stayed silent simply because they had kids to feed and medical bills to pay. "Sir?" Sarah Adams called out softly. The HR director was holding a massive stack of manila folders. "We finished speaking with the initial witnesses, but it looks like a lot more people want to come forward now that Derek is gone." Sam nodded. "Make absolutely sure that no one faces any retaliation for telling the truth." "Yes, sir." Ralph Monroe, the operations director, walked in looking completely drained. "We need to appoint an acting general manager by tomorrow morning. We can't pause service." "But Sam, this goes way deeper than just poor branch management. There are vendor invoices that look completely doctored. There are corporate rebates that never made it into the company accounts." "I know," Sam replied. "That is exactly why this doesn't end with a termination. We are going to rip this out by the roots." Out in the dining room, 3 employees were waiting. Jake, Maya, and Rose. They had all started with the company around the same time, 2 years ago. Jake was the lead line cook, a quiet guy who was always the first to arrive. Maya was the cashier, the kind of person who always had a warm smile for the regulars, no matter what she was going through personally. And Rose was a server who had put her college degree on hold to take care of her younger sister. They were the first 3 to approach HR after Derek was escorted out. "Are you all completely sure you are ready to put this on the record?" Sarah asked them as they sat in the break room. The 3 exchanged nervous glances. Maya looked down at the table. "Ma'am, if we stay quiet now, the next manager might just do the exact same thing." Rose gripped the edge of her chair. "But we are still scared he might come back. He always bragged about having powerful connections up at corporate." Sam heard that from the hallway. He walked into the room slowly. He didn't take the seat at the head of the table like an executive holding court. Instead, he grabbed a folding chair and sat right next to them, at eye level. "Nobody is coming back to threaten you," Sam said. "And if anyone tries, they will have to go through me first." Jake stared at him in disbelief. "Sir, is it true? Are you really the owner?" "Yes." "I am so sorry, man," Jake said, his voice shaking. "We honestly thought nobody up at corporate gave a damn about us." Sam froze. Hearing that hurt him more than any insult his family had ever thrown at him. Because, for the past few months, while he was so intensely focused on expanding the company, the very people keeping his business alive felt completely abandoned. "That is my failure too," Sam admitted quietly. "I didn't catch this fast enough, but starting today, you will never have to beg for someone to listen to you." That was the trigger for a massive internal investigation. The statements revealed a nightmare. Derek had been forcing the crew to sign altered time cards. If they worked a 12-hour shift, he adjusted it to look like a standard 8-hour day. When corporate sent the monthly budget for staff meals, Derek slashed it, pocketed the cash, and reported that the team was fully fed. He even colluded with certain suppliers, approving inflated invoices in exchange for under-the-table kickbacks. But the worst part was the psychological abuse. Derek had used his last name to terrorize the hourly workers. According to Maya, Derek's favorite line was, "Do you have any idea who I am? You can't touch me. One phone call, and you are out on the street." As Sam read through the signed affidavits, his mind kept flashing back to Derek at the lake house. The shiny shoes, the expensive watch, that perfectly practiced, arrogant smile. He couldn't believe that behind all the bragging, Derek was funding his lifestyle by stealing from people who were barely scraping by. Later that afternoon, while HR was finalizing the report, Derek actually came back to the restaurant. He wasn't wearing his tailored shirt anymore. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes were bloodshot, and it was obvious he hadn't slept a wink. He stormed through the front doors, looking frantically for Sam. "Where is he?" Derek screamed in the lobby. "Where is my cousin who suddenly thinks he is a king?" A few late lunch customers looked over in shock. Ralph and 2 security guards immediately stepped up to block him. But before things could turn violent, Sam walked out from the hallway. "Derek, this isn't the place to cause a scene," Sam said. "A scene?" Derek laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You are the one who made a scene. You humiliated me in front of my own staff." "I didn't humiliate you. Your own actions did that." Derek tried to lunge forward, but Ralph held him back. "You have always been jealous of me," Derek shouted. "Because I was the one the family actually cared about. I was the one with the presence. I was the one they believed in. So the second you got a little bit of money, you set out to destroy me." Sam just stood there, staring at him. Behind Derek, a few of the kitchen staff had stepped out to watch. Sam could see the old fear creeping back into their faces. "If this was about jealousy," Sam said, his voice echoing in the quiet lobby, "I would have fired you the very first day I saw your name on the corporate roster. But I didn't. I let you go through the exact same process as everyone else. You destroyed your own career." "You are a liar!" Derek screamed. Suddenly, Jake stepped forward from the crowd. He was pale, but his eyes were locked on Derek. "He isn't lying." Derek whipped his head around. "You, Jake? You ungrateful punk. Who do you think signed off on your full-time promotion?" "The company did," Jake shot back. "Not you." The lobby went dead silent. Jake swallowed hard, then kept talking. "For 4 months, you forced us to work off the clock. You made us sign papers saying we left early. When we tried to complain, you threatened to transfer us to a branch 2 hours away, or just fire us. That staff meal budget? It wasn't enough. Some days we were eating plain rice, but your report said we were eating full meals." Derek's face turned violently red. "You are making this up." "No, he isn't." Maya stepped up next. Her hands were shaking, but she didn't take a single step back. "You made me ring up bogus cash drops. I kept the duplicate receipts because I knew a day would come when we'd need them." Then Rose stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "You humiliated me in front of a packed dining room when I messed up a table number. You called me stupid. But I am not stupid. I was just exhausted because you scheduled me for 3 closing shifts in a row." Derek had absolutely nothing to say. His screaming faded into a pathetic silence. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just facing Sam, he was facing the very people he thought he had completely silenced. News reached the family before the sun even went down. It was unclear who made the first call, but by evening, Mary's phone was ringing off the hook. Aunt Carol called first, pretending to be concerned, but clearly digging for gossip. Uncle Fred called next, absolutely furious, claiming Sam was trying to ruin the family's reputation. Then Aunt Brenda called, sobbing hysterically, saying Sam had publicly crucified her son. Mary gripped the phone tightly. Beside her, Patrick sat on the couch, totally silent but hanging on to every word. "Did you know?" Mary suddenly asked Patrick. "Know what?" "How big his business actually is." Mary didn't answer right away. "I knew a little, but not all of it." "Why didn't you tell me?" Patrick demanded. Mary turned to look at her husband. For the first time in decades, there wasn't a trace of fear on her face. Was she exhausted? Yes. Was she sad? Yes. But she wasn't afraid. "Your son shouldn't have to become a millionaire before you decide to respect him, Patrick." The words hit Patrick like a physical blow. I just didn't know." "What didn't you know?" Mary fired back. "Did you not know that he was the one buying your medication? Did you not know that he stayed up all night nursing Noah when he was little? Did you not know he dropped out of college just so we wouldn't starve? You shouldn't need a portfolio of 10 restaurants to remember that he is your son." Patrick stood up, opening his mouth to argue, but no words came out. He walked out to the backyard and sat on an old wooden bench for over an hour. He stared at the street where Sam usually walked home every night. For the very first time, it dawned on him that the beaten-up backpack he always mocked wasn't a symbol of a lazy loser. It was carrying the weight of a family that never even bothered to say thank you. Meanwhile, back at Green Table Hospitality, the fallout from the firing was far from over. Sam called an emergency executive meeting with Sarah, Ralph, and Haley Spencer, the internal auditor who had been quietly tracking the discrepancies at Derek's branch. Haley was known around the office as a woman who feared no one. She spoke quietly, asked piercing questions, and refused to close an investigation until every single penny was accounted for. "Sir," Haley said, projecting a spreadsheet onto the wall. "This is not just simple misconduct. There is a documented pattern of embezzled vendor rebates. We have inflated invoices from 2 major suppliers, and based on the employee statements, multiple labor violations. Can we handle this legally without disrupting the staff?" "We can," Sam replied. "But the action has to be absolute. If we go easy on him, the rest of the company will think corporate theft is fine, as long as you are related to the boss." "So, what is the protocol for Derek?" Ralph asked. "We have more than enough evidence to press charges." Sam went quiet. He thought about Derek when they were kids, running through the sprinklers in their grandmother's backyard. But then he thought about Rose, crying in the lobby, defending her own intelligence. Blood is thick, but justice matters more. "We are filing formal labor and administrative complaints," Sam finally said. "We are going to legally compel him to return every stolen dollar. But I am holding off on criminal charges until the internal review is 100% complete. This isn't mercy, this is due process. I want it done by the book." Over the next few weeks, Sam overhauled the company culture. They launched a 24-hour anonymous employee hotline. They moved all overtime approvals to a digitized corporate system that a branch manager couldn't manipulate alone. They also mandated that all staff meal allowances be deposited directly onto employee paychecks. Sam also called a mandatory all-hands meeting for every single branch. He didn't stand behind a fancy podium, he stood on the floor, right in front of his crew. "A massive failure occurred at one of our locations," Sam told the crowd. "And as the leader of this company, I take full responsibility for not catching it sooner. But starting today, serving great food and hitting sales targets is no longer enough. The way we treat the people in this room is our top priority. If a manager threatens you, speak up. If a policy is broken, report it. You are not machines. You are not just numbers on a spreadsheet. You are the only reason Green Table exists." From that day on, the atmosphere in the company began to shift. It wasn't overnight perfection, but it was real progress. Jake was promoted to a kitchen lead trainee because of his undeniable work ethic. Maya was moved to an accounting support role at corporate because of her sharp eye for receipts. Rose was given a highly flexible schedule so she could finally go back to college. These weren't handouts, they were long overdue recognitions of talent that had been buried under bad management. For several days, Sam didn't come home until well past midnight. It wasn't because he was avoiding his family, but because the corporate cleanup was relentless. One night, he unlocked the front door and found Patrick sitting alone in the living room. The usual scowl was gone. The harsh remarks were gone. There was only a heavy, awkward silence between them. "Just getting back from work?" Patrick asked. Sam stopped in his tracks. Work. It was the very first time his dad had used that word, acknowledging that Sam was actually doing something with his life. "Yeah." His dad nodded, slowly stood up, and walked into the kitchen. A moment later, he came back holding a plate of food covered in foil. "Your mom saved you some dinner," Patrick said quietly. Sam took the plate. He wanted to hear the word sorry. He wanted his dad to look him in the eye and admit he was wrong, but those words didn't come. Not yet. Instead, Patrick sat back down on the far side of the room, looking like a man who had no idea how to approach the son he had pushed away for a decade. As Sam ate in silence, he realized the hardest part was just beginning. Fixing corporate spreadsheets and protecting employees was easy compared to navigating a father who didn't know how to apologize. But that night, Sam wasn't the weak kid shrinking into the background anymore. He was quiet because he was choosing patience. And for the first time, even without an apology, there was a tiny crack in the massive wall that had always stood between them. A full year had passed since Derek's corrupt management was exposed, and Green Table Hospitality looked like a completely different company. It was no longer a secret empire hidden inside Sam's beat-up backpack. The operational systems were airtight, communication with the staff was transparent, and every single branch was meticulous with their numbers, their people, and their trust. Out in the business world, people called Sam lucky, but inside the company, everyone knew luck had absolutely nothing to do with it. Every new location was built on sleepless nights, brutal mistakes, endless adjustments, and decisions that were incredibly hard to swallow. Sam was no longer the punchline at family barbecues, but he hadn't let the success go to his head either. You could still find him in the kitchens more often than the corporate office. He was always talking to the prep cooks, taste-testing the sauces, auditing the walk-in freezers, and making sure the line cooks were taking their mandatory breaks. "Sir, you know you can just let us handle that, right?" Maya said one morning. She had caught Sam personally breaking down cardboard boxes in the stockroom of the Lincoln Park branch. Sam just smiled. If the owner forgets how to break down a box, he is probably forgetting where he came from. Maya smiled back, but she could see the sheer exhaustion behind his eyes. Ever since she moved to the corporate accounting team, she truly understood the massive weight Sam was carrying. It wasn't just about profit margins. It was about 200 employees relying on their paychecks. It was about paying local farmers on time. It was about families putting food on the table because they had a job that treated them like human beings. But one early Monday morning, right when the central prep kitchen was gearing up for the lunch rush, a massive crisis hit that threatened everything they had built. "Ralph," a warehouse manager, shouted across the loading dock. "The produce truck for downtown and the West Loop still hasn't arrived, and our beef delivery is short by almost 50%. Ralph Monroe was standing in the middle of the kitchen, holding a clipboard, juggling 3 different phone calls. "What is the vendor saying?" "They claim it is highway traffic, but they have been saying 5 minutes away for 2 hours. Ralph knew better. He immediately dialed Sam, who was just pulling into the corporate parking lot. "Sam, we have a major issue," Ralph said. "This isn't a normal logistics delay. 3 different suppliers are suddenly coming up short, and it is way too specific. They are cutting the exact same ingredients, targeting the exact same branches. Downtown and West Loop. Are you sure?" Sam asked. "Positive." Sam went completely silent. He knew this was no accident. The downtown branch was Derek's former location, and the West Loop was their absolute highest earner for the corporate lunch crowd. If those 2 locations failed to open, it wouldn't just kill their daily revenue, it would permanently damage their reputation. "I am heading straight to the central kitchen," Sam said. "Tell every branch manager to hold off on advertising the full menu. We are pivoting. I absolutely refuse to lie to our customers. When Sam walked through the double doors of the central kitchen, Haley Spencer was already there. The internal auditor was laser-focused on her laptop, pulling up vendor history. Ralph was pacing nearby, looking like he was ready to punch a wall. At a nearby table, Maya was calming down a group of prep cooks who were terrified they were going to get fired for the delay. "This isn't incompetence, Sam," Haley said, without looking up from her screen. "I flagged a name buried deep in the old supplier emails. Nathan Clark. He was the primary account manager for the 2 vendors involved in Derek's kickback scheme." "Is he tied to the missing deliveries?" Sam asked. Haley nodded. "There is a massive paper trail. I can't definitively prove he is the mastermind yet, but ever since we cut off their under-the-table payments last year, his name vanished from the official contact list. Now, suddenly, he is the one making backdoor calls to our dock workers, hinting that things might get very difficult if we don't return to the old arrangement." Sam's jaw clenched. "So, it is extortion." "Yes." Ralph ran a hand over his face. "Sam, if we don't source these ingredients in the next 2 hours, downtown and West Loop are going to have to shut their doors by noon." Sam looked around the massive kitchen. He saw the panic in his employees' eyes. Some were staring at half-empty produce crates, others were just waiting for an order. The company was one giant machine, and right now, someone was trying to rip the engine out. "We do not close our doors unless the building is on fire," Sam said firmly, "and we absolutely do not negotiate with extortionists." Ralph immediately jumped into action. For 2 straight hours, he burned through his entire contact list. He called every food supplier in the state. Some hung up, some said it was impossible, and others quoted emergency prices that were pure robbery. Finally, Ralph remembered an old college buddy who ran a massive agricultural co-op downstate in Indiana. He dialed the number, praying for a miracle. "Carter, I need a massive favor," Ralph pleaded. "This isn't corporate posturing. I have hundreds of employees whose shifts depend on this. I need whatever you can load onto a truck right now. Vegetables, eggs, anything you can rush to the city." On the other end of the line, Eli Carter let out a heavy sigh. "Ralph, man, this is completely insane notice. But if it is Green Table you are buying for, I have heard you guys actually pay small farmers on time. Give me 20 minutes. I will rally the co-op." While Ralph was securing the emergency lifeline, Maya stepped up. Without waiting for permission, she grabbed a whiteboard and started organizing the kitchen staff. She assigned one team to rework the limited ingredients, found 3 employees with pickup trucks willing to run hot-shot deliveries to the branches, and mapped out a crisis menu. "Jake," Maya called out to the kitchen lead, "can the line survive on a modified menu that cuts out the braised beef entirely?" "Yeah," Jake replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We can pivot to roasted vegetable hash, chicken skillets, and classic diner melts. But the front of house needs to communicate this perfectly, or the customers will riot." "Rose," Maya pointed to the server-turned-supervisor. "You are on front of house duty. Instruct every cashier and server to be completely honest. No corporate excuses. Tell them we had a supply chain emergency. Offer a limited menu, and apply an automatic discount for the inconvenience." "Got it," Rose said, already dialing the branch managers. Sam stood by the office door, silently watching the chaos turn into a beautifully choreographed symphony. These were the exact same people he had protected a year ago. Now, they were the ones fighting tooth and nail to protect the company that had given them a second chance. He didn't have to yell. He didn't have to throw his weight around. They were moving not out of fear, but out of absolute loyalty. Maya walked over to him, looking slightly apologetic. "Sir, I am so sorry if I overstepped my bounds." Sam shook his head. "Never apologize for stepping up when it matters, Maya." Meanwhile, Haley wasn't letting the sabotage slide. While the kitchen scrambled, she meticulously documented every delayed delivery, screenshotted the threatening text messages, and compiled witness statements from the dock workers who took Nathan Clark's phone calls. She immediately conferenced in the company's legal team. "I am not letting this go," Haley told Sam. "If we just brush this off, they will think they can bully us forever. Finding a new supplier isn't enough, we have to bury them legally." Do exactly what you need to do, Sam replied. Just make sure the paper trail is bulletproof. Late that evening, the first massive delivery truck from the Indiana Co-op pulled up to the loading dock. It wasn't packaged in pristine corporate boxes. Some of the crates still had farm dirt on them. But the produce was vibrant, the pricing was honest, and the money was going straight into the pockets of the farmers who grew it. When Sam saw the pallets of fresh tomatoes, spinach, potatoes, and green beans rolling off the truck, it felt like 100-pound weight had been lifted off his chest. The head of the co-op, Eli Carter, stepped out of the cab. He was an older man, with calloused hands and a firm, no-nonsense handshake. "You must be Sam," Eli said. "Yes, sir. I cannot thank you enough for saving us at the last minute." "It isn't just a favor, son," Eli replied. "If your company is as solid as your buyer says it is, maybe we can make this a permanent handshake. We have been looking for a corporate partner who won't bleed us dry." Sam looked at Ralph and smiled. In the middle of a coordinated sabotage, a brand new door had just swung wide open. "Let's go into my office and talk," Sam said, "and I promise you, nobody gets shortchanged at this table." The crisis that nearly brought down 2 flagship branches ended up securing a permanent, direct trade partnership with the farmers. The first week wasn't flawless. There were still minor delays, menu tweaks, and a few frustrated Yelp reviews. But no restaurants closed, and not a single employee lost $1 of their paycheck. And when Haley's legal team officially filed a massive lawsuit against Nathan Clark and the corrupt vendors for extortion and breach of contract, the message was sent loud and clear. The old way of doing business was dead. As the company stabilized, things at the Mitchell house slowly began to shift as well. Mary, who had spent years quietly fading into the background of her own kitchen, suddenly found a new spark. She took charge of Green Table's new community kitchen initiative. Every Wednesday, she hosted workshops at a local community center, teaching struggling single moms how to batch cook affordable meals and turn them into small side hustles. At first, she was terrified. "Honey," she told Sam right before her first class, "I don't know if I belong up there. My catering business failed a long time ago. I probably forgot everything." Sam held his mom's hands. "Mom, your kitchen is where I learned everything I didn't know. You didn't lose your talent. It just got buried under a lot of exhaustion." That afternoon, Sam watched from the back of the room as the old light returned to Mary's eyes. She was commanding the kitchen, teaching a dozen women how to scale up a recipe without losing the homemade flavor. It wasn't a massive corporate stage, but for Mary, it was like reclaiming a piece of her soul that poverty had stolen away. Noah, the younger brother who used to promise to buy Sam new sneakers, was now enrolled in culinary school. Sam explicitly refused to just hand him a management job. "Man, I will gladly start as a dishwasher," Noah told him. "You focus on your classes first," Sam replied. "I am not giving you a shortcut. I am giving you the tools to build your own foundation." Noah smiled. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a burden to his older brother. He felt trusted. After years of working out of state, Olivia finally moved back home. She looked thinner, much quieter, and carried a deep exhaustion that new clothes and souvenirs couldn't hide. On her first night back, she and Sam awkwardly avoided each other. They were both carrying old wounds. Olivia felt guilty for leaving, and Sam was still bruised from being left to carry the family alone. Late that night, while Mary was making tea in the kitchen, Olivia sat down next to Sam. "Sam," she whispered, her voice cracking, "I don't even know how to begin apologizing." Sam looked at her. "You didn't do anything wrong, Olivia. You left to keep a roof over our heads. But I left you to take the hits alone." A long, heavy silence hung in the air. Then, Sam set down his mug and pulled his sister into a tight hug. It wasn't a movie magic hug that instantly erased a decade of trauma. It was heavy, quiet, and long. It was 2 siblings finally admitting that they were both just incredibly tired. Patrick, on the other hand, didn't magically transform into a perfect father. A man who has worn his stubborn pride like armor for decades doesn't change overnight. But Sam noticed the small things. Patrick stopped making snide comments when Sam left the house at night. He stopped calling him lazy when Sam crashed on the couch after a 14-hour shift. Whenever Mary had her community kitchen classes, Patrick was the one waiting by the door with the car keys, ready to drive her, even though his knees were killing him. One night, when Sam got home late from the West Loop branch, he found an old photograph sitting on the kitchen counter. It was a picture of him when he was a little boy, smiling, holding a bulky calculator in his mom's old kitchen. On the back of the photo, written in Patrick's shaky handwriting, was a simple message: "I don't know how to make up for the past, but I finally remember exactly when I started losing my way." Sam didn't break down crying. He didn't run to his dad's bedroom for an emotional confrontation. He just sat at the kitchen island, holding the picture, listening to his dad's faint snoring down the hall. Sometimes, an apology doesn't come out as a perfectly scripted speech. Sometimes, it starts with a stubborn man simply admitting that he lost something precious. Meanwhile, Derek was living a completely different life. After the corporate lawsuit settled, he was legally bound to pay back every stolen dollar in monthly installments. The friends who used to feed off his arrogance completely abandoned him. His extended family stopped bragging about him. Aunt Brenda stopped showing up to family events out of pure embarrassment. Out of desperation, Derek had to take a minimum wage job working in Uncle Fred's dusty logistics warehouse. There were no air-conditioned offices, no fancy leather chairs, no terrified employees bringing him coffee. He spent his days hauling heavy boxes, counting inventory in the freezing cold, and getting screamed at whenever he miscounted a pallet. "Pick up the pace, Derek," Uncle Fred yelled one afternoon. "You think you are still some hotshot executive? Everyone works for a living in this building." Derek froze, dripping with sweat, holding a 50-pound box of auto parts. His instinct was to run his mouth, to pull rank. But he had no rank left. His name meant absolutely nothing here. For the first time in his life, he felt exactly what it was like to be a disposable worker. And in that moment, the faces of Jake, Maya, and Rose flashed in his mind. That night, while locking up the warehouse, Derek caught his reflection in a dirty window. The flashy watch was gone, the tailored shirts were gone. Staring back at him was just an exhausted, humiliated guy, finally learning how to look at his own mistakes without making a single excuse. By the end of the year, nothing was perfectly resolved. The family still had scars, the legal team was still wrapping up contracts, the business still demanded brutal hours. But Sam Mitchell's life was fundamentally different. He no longer had to hide in the shadows just to protect his ambitions. Slowly but surely, he was learning to let people see not just his success, but the scars he earned protecting it. 3 years had passed since the Mitchell family finally stopped hiding behind their pride and pretending everything was fine. Healing wasn't a fast process. There were still awkward dinners. There were still moments when Patrick would look away in shame whenever the past was brought up. But month by month, the tension faded. They were no longer pretending to be a perfect family. They were just trying to be a real one. Green Table hospitality had exploded in growth. What started as 10 restaurants was now 25 locations stretching across the state and into the neighboring suburbs. They weren't just famous for great food anymore. They were recognized for their ironclad employee benefits, their direct trade contracts with local farmers, and the thriving community kitchen program run by Mary. Sam's dream, which started in a leaky 3-table diner, was now putting hundreds of kids through college and paying hundreds of mortgages. Yet, despite the massive success, Sam hadn't changed his routine. He still showed up before the sun came up. He still learned the name of every new security guard. He still shook hands with the dishwashers. When a new crew member was hired, Sam never introduced himself as the CEO. He preferred to watch how people treated their coworkers when they thought the boss wasn't looking. One Tuesday morning, at the grand opening of their new Oak Park location, Ralph walked up to Sam holding an iPad. "Sir," Ralph said, scrolling through a spreadsheet. "The guest list for the corporate anniversary gala is finalized. Are you absolutely certain you want to invite everyone on this list?" Sam glanced at the screen. The list included Teresa Baker, Mrs. Thompson, Gavin, Eli Carter, the branch managers, the kitchen leads, and almost the entire extended family. It also included the name Derek Vance. Ralph noticed Sam staring at the name. "We can pull his invitation if it is going to cause a scene, Sam." Sam shook his head. "I am not inviting him to erase what he did. I am inviting him because he is part of the story. If he doesn't have the guts to show up, that is on him. But I refuse to spend the rest of my life carrying around a grudge." Ralph nodded, a look of genuine respect on his face. "You operate on a different frequency, boss." "Not really," Sam replied softly. "I am just tired of carrying heavy things." The anniversary gala was held at their massive new flagship location downtown. It wasn't a pretentious, black-tie affair. There were no chandeliers or red carpets. Instead, the dining room was warm and inviting, and every table featured a small potted plant, a nod to the very first plant Mrs. Thompson gave Sam years ago. Mary personally oversaw the catering menu. They served classic diner melts, roasted vegetable hash, braised beef skillets, and an incredible array of farm-to-table specials. As Sam watched the kitchen crew working in perfect harmony, his mind flashed back to their old flooded kitchen and the terrified teenager staring at a mountain of past-due bills. "Sam," Mary called out, noticing him staring into space. He smiled. "Just remembering the days when I thought we were at the end of the road." Mary stepped up and straightened his lapel. "It wasn't the end, honey. It was just a detour." She laughed softly, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. "If you hadn't endured all of that, we wouldn't be standing here. And if you hadn't learned to cook with a good heart, none of this food would taste this good." Across the room, Noah was actively managing the floor. He had graduated culinary school and was now a kitchen supervisor at one of the training branches. He didn't get the job because of his last name. He took the same exams and worked the same brutal shifts as everyone else. "Hey," Noah said, walking past Sam with a clipboard. "Try not to make your speech sound like a corporate earnings report tonight, okay? Be human." Sam laughed. "I am more nervous about this speech than my quarterly tax audits." Olivia arrived shortly after. She looked radiant. After taking time to heal, she had launched a small catering branch under the community kitchen umbrella, helping single mothers build independent businesses. She and Sam still bickered about logistics, but it was the healthy arguing of two professionals, not the bitter fighting of wounded siblings. "Are you ready for this?" Olivia asked, handing him a glass of water. "For the crowd, or for the family?" "Both," Sam sighed. "I honestly don't know." Olivia smiled. "Sometimes just standing your ground is enough." As the sun set, the guests poured in. Mrs. Baker arrived in a wheelchair, pushed by Gavin. Even though she was frail, her sharp wit hadn't faded one bit. "Well, well," Mrs. Baker said as Sam leaned down to hug her. "Your kitchen got a lot bigger, but I hope your ego didn't." "You are still my boss, Mrs. Baker," Sam said, kissing her cheek. "Darn right I am. If you ever start acting like a corporate snob, I will beat you with a wooden spoon right out of this chair." Laughter echoed around them. Then, Mrs. Thompson walked up quietly, holding a small, worn-out notebook. "I brought you a gift," she said. Sam opened it. It was a collection of the old business essays he had written for her class years ago, covered in her red ink grading note. "You kept these?" Sam asked, stunned. "Of course I did," the retired teacher smiled. "I wanted you to remember that long before you were a CEO, you were just a student of life." Sam couldn't even speak. He just pulled the teacher into a hug, deeply grateful to the woman who believed in him when nobody else did. Soon, the family arrived. Mary walked in alongside Patrick. His dad walked much slower now, relying on a cane, his body paying the toll for years of neglect, but his posture was different. He no longer walked into a room looking for an argument. When Patrick saw Sam, he stopped. "Son," he said simply. There was no grand monologue. They just looked at each other for a few seconds. But in that quiet exchange, there was a decade of understanding. Aunt Carol, Uncle Fred, and Aunt Brenda arrived next. They were incredibly quiet. There were no backhanded compliments, there was no bragging. Maybe it was because they finally realized that the beautiful venue they were standing in and the food on their plates was provided by the very man they had spent years calling worthless. Derek was the last to arrive. He had lost weight. He was wearing a plain, off-the-rack button-down. There was no flashy watch, no arrogant strut. He was holding a small manila folder and a thick envelope. A few relatives immediately turned their backs on him, whispering to each other. But Derek didn't run away. He walked straight up to Sam. "Thank you for the invite," Derek said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I hope you came because you are ready to face this, and not because you want things to go back to how they were," Sam replied. Derek nodded. "I don't want things to go back to how they were. I hated who I was." He handed over the thick envelope. "This is the deposit receipt for the final restitution payment. Every dollar I took is back in the corporate account. I know it doesn't erase what I did, but I refuse to run from it anymore." Sam took the envelope and handed it to Haley, who was standing nearby. Derek held up the second folder. His hands were physically shaking. "These are letters. For Jake, Maya, Rose, and the others. I don't expect them to read them. I don't expect forgiveness. But I had to put it in writing." Sam looked closely at his cousin. For the first time in his entire life, there was no defensive wall in Derek's eyes. There was just a tired, broken honesty. "Derek," Sam said, "forgiveness isn't a master key that unlocks every door. Some doors have to stay closed while you rebuild yourself." "I know," Derek said. "I am not asking for my job back. I don't deserve it." "Then what are you asking for?" Derek took a deep breath. "A chance to start at the absolute bottom. Whenever you think I am ready, put me in the furthest branch, make me a trainee. I just want to learn how to do an honest day's work without hurting people." Sam didn't answer right away. He looked around the room. He saw his employees laughing. He saw his mom smiling with her community kitchen graduates. He saw his dad sitting quietly at a table. "We will evaluate it," Sam finally said. "But not because you are family. If you truly want to change, you will go through the exact same grueling process as every new hire." "Thank you," Derek whispered, his voice cracking. When it was time for the speeches, Sam didn't use a teleprompter. He stepped up onto the small wooden stage, looking out at the crowd of people who had built him, broken him, and helped put him back together. "Thank you all for being here," Sam started. "When I started this journey, I had 3 wobbly tables, 1 old recipe book, and a terrifying fear that I wouldn't make rent. But I met people who taught me that business isn't just about revenue, it is about respect." He looked at Mrs. Baker. "I was taught that you don't publicly humiliate people when you can teach them privately." He looked at Mrs. Thompson. "I learned that a piece of paper doesn't determine your worth." He looked at Gavin, who was cheering loudly with a beer in his hand. "I found people who bet on me when my only collateral was sweat equity and sheer stubbornness." Laughter rippled through the room. "I also had employees who taught me that a real leader has to listen when the people beneath him are bleeding. And I have a family who taught me that the deepest wounds aren't found in a boardroom, they are found at the dinner table." At that exact moment, Patrick stood up. A hush fell over the room. Sam froze. Slowly, using his cane, Patrick walked toward the stage. Noah tried to help him, but Patrick held up a hand, insisting on walking alone. "Sam," Patrick said, his voice trembling, "can I say something?" Sam lowered the microphone and handed it down to his dad. The entire venue was dead silent. "A few years ago, at a family reunion, I called my son a leech," Patrick said, his voice echoing through the speakers. "I said it because I thought he was a failure, but the truth was, I was totally blind. I didn't see the kid who dropped out of school to put food on our table. I didn't see the kid coming home exhausted at 2 a.m. I didn't see the kid buying my medication with his own pocket change, while I sat in my chair and called him a loser." Mary covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "The biggest shame a man can carry," Patrick continued, his voice breaking, "is not being poor. The biggest shame in the world is being a father who waits until his son is rich before deciding to respect him." Sam looked down at the floor. He had waited a decade to hear those words. He thought they would magically erase the pain, but they didn't. It still hurt. But beneath the hurt, a massive weight finally lifted. Patrick turned and looked directly at Sam. "I am so sorry, my son. I can never give you those years back. But whatever time I have left on this earth, I am going to spend it trying to earn your forgiveness." Sam stepped off the stage. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight up to the bitter, angry man who used to terrify him, and wrapped his arms around him. "Dad," Sam whispered, his own voice cracking, "I have been waiting a very long time to hear you say that." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Mary was sobbing openly. Olivia leaned her head on Noah's shoulder. And at the tables, the relatives who used to join in on the mockery sat in stunned silence. In that moment, they finally understood that words thrown casually in public leave scars that have to be healed in public too. Life didn't become a fairy tale after the anniversary. But the road ahead was finally clear. Mary eventually opened a small, brick-and-mortar bakery funded by the Community Kitchen program, employing several women who used to rely on food stamps. Noah became the regional training director, designing the onboarding process for all new culinary hires. Olivia expanded her catering logistics, implementing a strict policy that every single temp worker got a living wage and guaranteed break times. Patrick never went back to his old screaming ways. There were still days when he was grumpy or quiet. But he learned how to ask questions instead of throwing insults. Sometimes, when Sam got home late from the office, Patrick would be the one waiting to unlock the front door. "Did you eat yet?" Patrick would ask. It was a simple question, but for Sam, it was the ultimate act of love. As for Derek, he wasn't handed a corporate desk. He spent 6 months doing mandatory counseling, financial audits, and volunteering at a local food bank without telling a soul. When Sam saw that the arrogance was truly gone, he allowed Derek to apply as a trainee at their furthest location down in Indiana, under a manager who had zero ties to the family. Down there, Derek wiped down tables. He hauled boxes of frozen fries. He clocked in early, and he learned how to say, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake," without making a single excuse. Months later, Sam did a surprise walkthrough of that Indiana branch. He spotted Derek in the dining room, talking to a brand new teenage cashier who had just completely messed up a massive order. Sam stopped behind a pillar and listened. "Hey, it is okay," Derek told the panicked kid. "We can fix this. Next time, just read the order back to the kitchen before you hit send. You aren't stupid, man. You just made a mistake." Sam didn't walk over. He didn't need to ruin the moment. He just turned around and walked out to his car, feeling a quiet sense of peace. Derek's redemption was far from over, but he was finally walking in the right direction. A few months later, the Mitchell family had a simple Sunday dinner at home. There were no cameras, no corporate milestones, no extended relatives to impress. It was just Sam, Mary, Patrick, Olivia, and Noah sitting around the kitchen table, eating food they had cooked themselves. In the center of the table was Mary's famous vegetable hash, the classic diner melts from Sam's original menu, and fresh bread from the new bakery. As they ate, Sam noticed his old, busted backpack hanging on a hook by the back door. He didn't use it anymore, but he refused to throw it away. It was a permanent reminder of the nights he walked alone in the dark, while the world thought he was going nowhere. "Hey, man," Noah said, pointing with his fork. "Why don't you throw that garbage bag away? You can afford a designer briefcase now." Sam smiled, taking a sip of his water. "Not everything that is old needs to be thrown out. You have to keep some things around so you never forget who you are." Patrick nodded slowly, chewing his food. Then, he looked across the table at his oldest son. "I should have been proud of you a long time ago, Sam," Patrick said quietly. "Not because you built a restaurant empire, but because you never turned into me when I broke your heart." Sam didn't say anything back. He didn't need to. He just looked around the table. He saw a mother who had learned how to dream again. He saw a sister who had finally found her peace. He saw a brother growing into a leader. And he saw a father who had finally learned how to love without keeping score. That night, there was no applause. There was no arrogant family reunion. There was nobody left to prove anything to. There was just a highly imperfect family, choosing to sweep up the broken pieces and build something real. And right then and there, Sam Mitchell realized that true success isn't defined by having 20 restaurants, hundreds of employees, or a name that commands respect in a boardroom. True success is being able to walk through your own front door without ever having to hide who you really are. It is the ability to forgive without forgetting the lesson. And it is choosing to remain a good person, even after the people who mattered most once told you that you were worth absolutely nothing.